we're going to discuss what is conflict. How does conflict impact my pain, the different types of conflict. So there's internal conflict as well as external conflict. I'll provide examples of those, and we'll learn a little bit how to deal with them when they arise and how to prevent them. And then I'll have times for questions and answers, and I'll provide you with some resources that I have found really helpful. So what is conflict? Oh, sorry. Oops.
Are you okay there, Kara? There's no presenter.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Okay, I was just realizing that you had disappeared for a moment. So just take a breath and join back in your camera, and you should be okay.
Yeah,
Kara, there you are. I think I have to remake you the presenter. Here we go.
sorry about that, everybody. I apologize. So basically, what is conflict? Conflict is, according to the dictionary, it's disagreements, prolonged struggles, incompatible beliefs or activities. Psychologists refer to it as conflict can arise when the individual's reality clashes with opposing desires, wants, or needs. So conflict...
Kara, I just need to stop you for a sec because I
Yep.
don't see your slides.
Okay.
I'm just wondering how come that might be. I know I changed presenter to you, and I'll try it one more time just to be sure. No, you're the presenter. And it says I'm viewing your screen, but I don't see it. We have all you folks in listen-only mode, but there is a chat box and a question box. So if you're experiencing the same problem, and I'm just going to go and see if our expert is still here to help us figure out how come we are having this issue. I see you there. Oh, there we go. We're getting there.
Are we getting there? Okay.
Yeah, we are.
Can you see this now?
Yeah, and you just need to put yourself in play mode, and there you are. All right, we're good.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start back. So conflict is basically when there is a disagreement, oh, the screen, or prolonged struggles or incompatible beliefs or activities. Psychologists refer to conflict arises when there's basically our realities clash or oppose our desires, wants, and needs. So conflict is often arises when there's a difference, when there's something confusing going on, or there's inconsistencies between ourselves or between others. So how does conflict affect pain? Conflict can trigger emotion responses, which can influence stress. Many of us have been taught that stress is caused by an event. So I wanted to talk a little bit about stress and how it relates to conflict. So basically, psychologists have found that it's not so much the event that causes stress, but it's how we, is two belief systems. So that can lead to an event being stressful. So the first is if the person believes that they do not have the tools or knowledge or skills to deal with the event, they will see it as stressful. Or if the person believes they cannot access these tools or knowledge in somebody else or an outside way, they will see the event as stressful. And so a conflict can be seen as something stressful if we have these two beliefs. Conflicts and the resolutions of it can also influence our self-esteem and confidence. So if we are having successful outcomes within our conflicts in our lives, it will most likely raise our self-esteem and confidence, which can spill over to successful pain management, or it can decrease it. Numerous studies have shown that our emotional states and environment can influence pain, and I'll discuss those in the following slides. So not all conflict is bad. Although conflict can be extremely stressful, exhausting, and frustrating, and unpleasant, it doesn't have to be that way, and it doesn't have to have a negative influence on us. Again, remember, it's not this event that determines the stress, but it is our reaction to it. And so Dr. Kelly, I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, she gives this fabulous talk about stress and how our belief systems, whether stress is a negative or a positive, will actually change our body chemistry. And so if we see it as a negative, it actually produces more inflammation in the body, but if we see it as positive, then it actually can produce really beneficial things in our body. And so see how we see our conflict and whether we see it as a stress or not can determine how it influences our pain. So if we see conflict as an opportunity to bond, to educate, to learn, to grow, to practice effective communication, problem-solving skills, it won't have as much as a bad influence, or it won't necessarily raise our pain levels as much. So a lot of researchers have found that there's a strong correlation between our emotions and persistent pain. And correlation does not mean cause and effect. It just means that there's a relationship there. And so what they have found is that negative emotions such as sadness, anger, frustration, etc., can often lead in higher pain intensities, whereas positive emotions such as happiness, laughter, joy can actually decrease our pain levels. However, researchers also notice that this is not always true, because depending on the circumstance, it can be the opposite effect. For example, in war, researchers have found that in World War II and World War II, or I and II, is that soldiers who were receiving a gunshot wound often required less pain medication and reported less pain compared to if the wounds happened in a peaceful time. And so what researchers are believing is that our belief system can influence how the body experiences pain. And part of this is that they believe at a wartime, having a wound takes a soldier off the battle, and so the wound is seen as a good event. It brings the soldier into peace, whereas in peace times, a wound like that would be significant danger. And so this is a little bit how our emotions and our beliefs can influence our pain. So as we know, not all conflict is bad. Other belief systems that can govern how we see conflict is what psychologists have called locus of control. So locus of control refers to the extent of one feels that they can control over their life. So there's two types. There's internal, which the individuals who practice this type of belief system believe that they have control over their outcomes. They can influence things and change things. External control, the individual believes that things aren't that easy to change. And so these two belief systems can influence how we see conflict. So a person who is practicing internal control believes that they have some level of control over their circumstances and they can bring about change. Where people who exercise external control, they consider that it's much harder to change their environment and they're resistant to change. And so some of the research, what has found is that people who practice internal control, this is again when we see we can change, we believe we can change things, they see themselves less disabled, they have shorter durations in pain intensity and pain symptoms. They also experience less psychological distress and have more successful outcomes than individuals who practice external locus of control. Those are individuals who feel that they aren't able to necessarily change things. Exerting control over our life can influence our outcome, leading to more possible to external conflicts, conflicts between other people. This occurs because people may not understand our needs. People may not believe our needs are real. And another reason why this can happen is because if we believe we can change things, we may believe that our options or our ideas are better than people who are not experiencing our problem, and we may be not necessarily open to other people's input, and that can lead to more conflict. Baker, Butchin, and Corson in 2008 found that some people who exercise high levels of internal locus of control can lead to negative outcomes and internal conflicts. When a person experiences high levels of internal locus control, so this is, they really believe that they can influence everything in their lives, and they have repeated negative outcomes with managing their pain, this situation can instigate the belief that they are responsible for the lack of an improvement. They can tend to blame themselves for their inability to control or to overcome the chronic situation. And so it can lead to a lot of internal dialogues that are quite conflicting between the reality and the situation. So high levels of internal locus control can lead to more internal conflicts. High levels of external control can also lead to conflicts, such as your belief systems and your expectations may not match reality, or they may be out of sorts. So you may not believe that you can control things where other people see that you do have some influence over it, and it can lead to more conflicts. So there's a little test to try to figure out what type of locus of control you have. And I don't know if you watched the series Bull et al. It deals with a lot of psychological topics, but in one of the episodes they did what's called the cold test. So depending on how you see how you can catch a cold, it helps you to figure out whether you have internal or external control. So if you believe that you can catch a cold by washing your hands, or by not washing your hands, or hanging out with people who are sick, then you're more likely to have internal locus of control, because you believe that if you wash your hands, if you limit being around sick people, you can decrease your chance of getting a cold. Now, if you believe that it's just cold season and it's just the luck of the draw, you're going to get one no matter what, then you're more likely practicing external control. Knowing what type of locus of control you have does help you to figure out what types of conflicts I'm going to have and how to minimize those conflicts in our lives. So there's two types of conflicts. There's internal conflicts and external. So internal is basically what's going on inside of us. External is usually between one or two or more people. So internal conflict is also called intrapersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict occurs when our reality does not match our internal desires and needs. Interpersonal conflict occurs within us. It's an internal battle going on between our thoughts. It can also occur when our ideas, thoughts, feelings, tendencies, and values do not match our expectations, or the expectations we feel others have placed on us. It is often governed by absolute thinking and inflexible thoughts. So here are some examples. So these examples here have to do with expectations and our beliefs. And so it's a lot of, they're usually internal dialogues we have. So for example, it could be, other people with persistent pain are able to do this, so I should be able to do it. I was able to do this before pain, I should be able to do it now. I was able to do this activity at this level of performance before pain, I should be able to do it now. I should be able to do this activity in a certain period of time because this is what I did before pain. I agreed to do something, therefore I have to do it. If I attend a psychologist, it means I'm saying my pain is not real. Most people assume I'm faking my pain or it's not as bad as I state it to be. And this last one can definitely lead to, can spill over to external problems because we're believing that people have these beliefs about us. So having unrealistic expectations or incorrect expectation can lead to internal conflicts. These are usually governed by beliefs and expectations. And they can be resolved often by adjusting our beliefs and challenging our beliefs. And a lot of times, it also, we should remind ourselves that we're doing a good job, and that comparing ourselves to how we were in the past to the present is not always going to be helpful to us. And so it's learning how to accept and be where we are. Other internal conflicts can arise from trying to find a balance or reduction in pain. And so these are internal questions we might be asking ourselves, such as, do I ask for help? Or do I try to solve this on my own? Do I ask for accommodation at work, or do I not? Do I take this medication or do I not? Do I try this treatment? Do I not? Do I try this alternative method or not? Do I exercise today, and how much? Do I try this treatment, or do I try something else? Do I go on the site that's supposed to help with pain or not? Do I say yes to this invite? What are the consequences? Or do I say no? Do I agree to this task or do I not? And another way that these type of internals can also arise is from what-if statements. So what-if statements are usually dealing with a hypothetical past and projecting it into our future. So one thing that I found that ended up really struggling with was, when pain first came into my life, was a lot of my girlfriends at the time were getting married. And I always felt was my pain's the reason why I'm not getting married. And so I really had to challenge this belief and look at it. And so I looked at my other girlfriends and realized a lot of them were still single and they did not have pain. And so when these statements, the what if statements arise, I had to look at myself and go, well, is this really true? And so that's another way to kind of help deal with the what if statements. So how do we find resolutions to these? Dealing with intrapersonal conflicts can be really tricky, and it's best to seek guidance either through finding a pain coach with a master's in psychology or in counseling, or even somebody with PhD. And the reason why is because they're able to really get in our beliefs and help us figure out what's going on. And when we're doing it ourselves, it's sometimes hard to push us down to the deeper levels that we need to get to figure out, why are we having these internal conflicts and why do they keep arising. But there are some tools that we can do on our own. So let me just get to my slides. Okay, so there are 3 tools that I have found helpful with dealing with interpersonal conflicts. And so the first one is cognitive behavioral therapy. So most of this involves with identifying our errors of thoughts, our underlying beliefs of these thoughts, and challenging them. Mindfulness training, which I'll discuss a little bit later in more detail in external conflicts, but this is a lot of accepting without judgments. And then there's also the fight, flight, and float strategy, which I'll explain in the following slides. So we're first going to talk a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy. So, and I'll provide an example in the next slide. I have found it helpful to first identify the conflict. Emotions are a great and wonderful indicator that something's off. So if I'm feeling really sad or angry and I'm not really sure why, I go, okay, this is a key here. What was I doing before? What was my thought process? And then it's figuring out the underlying belief. What does this thought say about me? And once I have identified the belief, then I challenge it by either finding supporting evidence for it or against it. Sometimes this can be quite challenging. And so at times I have asked somebody who I really trust, what is the supporting evidence? What is the opposing evidence for it? And if I'm not comfortable doing that, sometimes I hit Google Scholar, the library, and start doing some research on the beliefs and trying to find opposing and supporting evidence for it. And once I challenge the belief, if I find enough supporting evidence that outweighs the opposing evidence, then I accept it. If I find more for the opposing evidence, then I must accept the new belief. So I replace the old belief with a new one. But the problem is that the old belief doesn't easily just go away like this. And you often have to repeat this exercise over and over and over again. And often within a 30-day period, you will notice that these thoughts and these beliefs leading to internal conflicts eventually do lessen. And so when the internal conflict arises again, I often say, thanks, brain, for alerting me to this. I repeat the exercise, and then I let it go. So here are some examples. Before pain, I was able to go out every weekend, and so I should now. So the internal conflict is I should be doing something that I'm not doing right now. And so the question that I then ask myself is, did I really go out every weekend prior to pain? No, there was times I was sick. There was times that I wanted to read a book or watch a movie. And so I didn't go out all the time. And so then after I've identified the belief or the thought, and then I've challenged it, and then the next step is finding the underlying belief. So the underlying belief for this is that I should be perfect. If I'm not perfect, then I'm unlovable. And so it comes down to a fear that's governing this internal conflict. Another example is before pain, I was able to meet all my deadlines, and I should be able to do that now. And so then I find supporting evidence or I challenge or opposing evidence. And the first question I might ask myself is, did I really meet deadlines at work and at home? No, there was times that I had to move them, I had to ask for help, or I just simply decided that the project was no longer interesting enough to do. And the other question I might ask myself is, do other people miss deadlines or ask for extensions? And of course they do. And I might come up with examples of when a friend or a coworker did this. And the next step then is, what is the underlying belief? And the first level is, I'm afraid I may lose relationships if I'm not dependable. And so underneath that one is fear. Or I'm unlovable if I'm not dependable. And so again, underneath that is fear. And so when you isolate the core belief, then it is easy to address it and to figure out what's going on. So the fight, flight, and float strategy is another way to deal with interpersonal conflict or internal conflicts. And so fight stands for, is basically to educate yourself. So you might want to educate yourself more on your illness by finding out more, what are the challenges I'm going to face, what are challenges other people face with my illness, what are the expectations of it. So it's always a good idea here to talk to other people who are living with this to try to figure out ways to better educate yourself on the illness. You may also want to research the human rights and the duty to accommodate with it. That more has to do with external conflicts, but it may help you also to figure out, if the conflict is, do I ask for accommodation? What are my rights? And so knowing that helps you to prepare yourself, so when you enter into a conflict, you're really well prepared for it. Also with the fight, for the internal side, I find it's helpful is to know that to know the position of both sides. So when it's internal, I try to separate myself, and sometimes on a piece of paper I might write out a column for the two sides of the arguments presented that way, and to kind of let both sides have their say, and to then try to find a resolution. That's one way to deal with the fight stance. The second way is to flight. So this flight stands for leaving. Leaving is very hard when it's an internal conflict, because you can't really leave yourself. Although it may be as simply as deciding that this isn't going to be an issue for you anymore. And you can do that by giving yourself goals, and be really patient with yourself as you meet it. So an example for this is, I no longer want to feel guilty when I have to say no to people. And then it's practicing saying no to people, and so that can help reduce the internal conflicts of feeling of false guilt by having to say no to people. Float stands for rising above the situation. This is often involves mindfulness or visualization. And so mindfulness, again, is accepting without judgment. And so if the conflict arises, whether it's a thought or belief or a question, it simply is accepting, okay, this is where it is again. I'm not going to judge it. I'm just going to say, yep, there it is. Okay, I see ya. Or it's visualizing the outcome that you may want. So how to avoid interpersonal conflict. So the first one is acceptance. So acceptance can vary from individual to individual on how it looks. I'll just use the acceptance of accepting pain in my life. I find it hard to accept that pain is always going to be in my life, and so for me, what I personally do is I look at it as that today I have pain, but tomorrow may be a different day, and then when I wake up, I have to re-embrace and accept that today I have pain, but tomorrow may be different. And number two is communicate your needs, wants, and desires. And so this is really, communication is a key to yourself to avoid internal conflict. So sometimes it helps by writing out what your limits are, what your needs are, what your wants and your desires are. And it's really good to be honest with yourself in this situation. And by knowing what your needs, wants, and desires are, and even what your limits are, it can help you formulate an argument that when the conflict comes up, whether it is, I believe I should do this because I did this before, it's simply going, well, no, these are my limits. And then it's accepting it and go, well, no, these are my needs and my desires, and this is what I can still do. And so that's one way. Allowing for graciousness and having a merciful attitude to yourself is also very helpful. And so I like to look at this as when a child's learning, we don't berate them or get mad at them when they're learning how to walk or read or talk. They're going to stumble along the way. And when we are learning how to reduce conflicts and to manage our lives, we're going to stumble, we're going to make mistakes, but those are key to figuring out how to do it. And so it's really important that we're really gracious and we allow for our mistakes. Another one is to have, number 5 is to have an action plan. And so here it's a good thing to write out, what do I need to look for? What are my thoughts that are leading to conflicts internally in my life? What are the belief systems? The sooner you identify the conflict, the sooner you can resolve it. What are your steps that you're going to use? So steps could be such as setting realistic and achievable goals. So research have found that when you set achievable goals, you're more likely to have better pain management, and you're also more likely to be happy. So how do you set achievable goals? You start off with doing little small steps. So you work towards something big. You break it down. Another good thing that I like to do is that I write out what are my daily goals for today, and so they can be cleaning the kitchen, taking my dog for a walk, going out grocery shopping. And then beside each of the goals I write, I give a number from 1 to 10 on the likelihood of achieving the goal. So if I give it a 7 or above, it means I really believe this is going to happen. So I make that a priority goal to complete. If it's below a 5, I'm most likely not going to do it. So I might as well just cross out that goal and maybe look at it for another day. So you want to achieve goals that you know that you're going to achieve, because it will build up your confidence. And the last step is also learning from your conflicts. See your conflicts, when they're internal conflicts, see them as, this is a growing process. This is me learning how to become accepting where I am at. This is me learning how to adjust my new lifestyle. And so those really help when you see your internal conflicts as a positive instead of a negative thought that keeps recurring. Other things to watch out for with interpersonal conflicts. So these are, again, negative emotions. Those are the keys that something's wrong. Pain levels. So pain levels that may be an indication that there's something going wrong as well. Or it may simply telling you is that, you know, maybe I need to be a little bit easier on myself with my thoughts, and maybe this is not the time to address this conflict, and maybe I should float. So pain levels can tell you how to deal with the conflict that's going on. Another thing to watch out for is decisions and options. When you have decisions and options, that can lead to confusions and not knowing what to do, and that can lead to internal conflicts as well. Not understanding can lead to internal conflicts. And so with number 3 and number 4, simply, you know, research helps to reduce these conflicts, and weighing the pros and cons can also help as well. The last thing I want to touch on with kind of internal conflicts is financial conflicts, and these can this financial conflict often is interpersonal, and it can go to an external conflict as well. And so a lot of times with managing our pain, we're going to be coming up with whether we do experimental treatments or alternative treatments, and this leads to out-of-pocket expenses. And I just know from myself, learning to manage chronic pain and having a full balanced life has not left me with the same income level that I was used to prior to it. And so I have to learn how to budget for these type of expenses without it leading to conflicts in my life. And so there's a lot of great tools out there, from GoFundMe pages to doing big sales, even sometimes people will do bartering systems. And another way that I try to reduce this conflict is doing a lot of research. I know sometimes we're not feeling well, it's hard to do, but just doing sometimes 5 minutes a day can help me decide whether this is a treatment that's worth me putting my my hard-earned money into it. And research also helps me to deal with the internal conflicts of, do I go this way or do I not? It reduces the confusion that's in my life. So now we're going to look at external conflicts. So external conflicts is also interpersonal conflicts. It's a conflict usually between one or two or more people. So internal conflicts is also known as interpersonal conflicts, as I said. It's a conflict that occurs when there's a disagreement with another individual. It's outside of you. So this is no longer a battle within us. It usually occurs when there's a mismatch between beliefs and expectations of both parties. So examples of external conflicts are when you're trying to access accommodation and it's denied. Accommodations are granted to you, but they don't work. You can't do what you agreed to do in a period of time, and somebody gets upset with you. The other person does not understand your illness. People do not believe the level of disability or the presence of a disability can lead to conflicts. It can also, if we believe that other people possess these beliefs about us, can lead to conflicts in our lives. It can also be when you can't access medical help or you do not believe you can access medical help. And one that I run into all the time is the conflict when you have to cancel your plans because of pain. So I'm just going to look where I'm at my notes. Okay. So how we deal with these types of conflict is mindfulness-based training is probably one of the best tools I have ever found for helping me to manage with pain. If you have not looked into doing this, you can do the 8-week course. Either you can buy the book or you can do it in person. There's some great schools in Vancouver who teach this. There's also the fight, flight, and float strategy that also helps with this type of conflict. So solutions. One of the best ways to deal with conflict between two people is understand your position, but also understand the opposing person's position. So we need to get outside ourselves and think of, why is a person disagreeing with us? When it is necessary, when you can't come to an agreement and the conflict is a really bad conflict, it is always good to bring in a non-biased third party. Ideally somebody who's a trained psychologist or counselor, or somebody who's trained in mediation or adjudicator. So here are some examples or one example I wanted to go over first is with external conflicts. It's wise to keep in mind it's not always the event that causes it. It's sometimes how we interpret the event. So an example that I was given in one of my psych classes was a husband's watching TV and the wife's in the kitchen and the wife asked, "Do you love me?" And the husband yells, "Yeah," and he never takes his eyes off the game. Or the husband turns around and says, "Yes, I love you," and then goes back to the game. Or the husband turns off the TV, goes in the kitchen, and says, "Yes, honey, I love you," and kisses her and helps with the dishes. Now, in all three situations, the husband has said, "I love you," but they can lead to different conflicts because it's how it's being said. So sometimes it's good to remind ourselves that it's not so much the event or the words that causes it, but how we interpret it. And so when we're seeing the opposing person's side, it's good to realize that. So looking at some of the options for fight and float. So some examples of conflicts that can arise, say in a work situation, is you're seeking a accommodation for chronic pain. Accommodations are often negotiations between one's needs and the duty to accommodate, and so this can lead to a conflict between the company not necessarily believing your wants and the needs are the same as yours does, or the level of accommodation they can provide. So it's always good in this situation to fight in the sense of know your research, know your illness, know what your rights are, and also know maybe when it's good to just step back and float for a while. Another example is dealing with insurance companies. And these can result in major to minor conflicts, and a lot of times they'll involve bringing in a third party to help you fight the situation. Disappointments from set or unset expectations. Expectations can be a huge, lead to a lot of conflicts, such as when we expect somebody to do something but we have not expressed it. It's really hard to get mad at that person because we're expecting the person to be a mind reader. So sometimes if we're mad at a person or a person's mad at us, it's great to step back and go, was the expectations set? And if it wasn't said, then maybe step back and go, okay, I didn't educate the person, so maybe I need to step back and go, it's time to retreat from this. Or maybe it's time to float and rise above it. Another example is dealing with a person who doesn't believe you. This is really hard because a lot of times you can educate the person, i.e. fight, and they still don't believe your situation. And so in these situations, these type of conflicts, it's often better just to, if you can, leave. And if you can't leave the situation or you can't leave the person because they're a family member, is learn how to rise above it. And that, the key to floating a lot is mindfulness training. So how do you prevent external conflicts? It's anticipating. So one thing that I find with chronic pain is really trying to figure out what are the conflicts that are likely to arise in my life. And so this could be from having to cancel, or it could be arriving late because I need a medication coming in. This could be from somebody not knowing about my illness, or it could arise from me having a hidden disability and people forgetting that it's there. Preventing. So once you anticipate what the conflicts are, you can start you can understand that. You can see from the other, you can step back and go, okay, what is the other person's point of view? And understanding your point of view and the other person's point of view can really de-escalate conflicts that can happen. And then having an action plan. So a lot of times with the action plan, it's understanding the problem from the other person's side. When the person lets me down, how does that make me feel? What would I have wished they had done differently? How can I change things, or how can I make them understand? With action plans, it's kind of what are the common conflicts that I'm dealing with from other people. That's a key to figure out. What are the common triggers for me? So is it when I'm in pain, am I more likely to get into an argument, or am I more likely to be irritable? So knowing what your triggers are, then you can step back and go, okay, you know what, this is the time that I may need to retreat and excuse myself. And effective communication. Effective communication is is key. It often takes us 3 times to understand what a person is saying to us. So I find with effective communication, one thing I like to do is when a person is talking to me, I repeat back. So what I hear you saying is, and I repeat back what they say. And then they can say, yes, that's what I said, or no. And then I kind of repeat back so that I hear this is what you're saying. And usually by the 3rd time, it takes longer to communicate, but usually by the 3rd time of repeating back and forth, both sides are understanding each other really well. Another effective communication tool is simply going, if somebody has upset you, it is, when you said this, it made me feel like this. And so you state what they did, and you state it briefly, and then you state how it made you feel. So it made me feel angry, it made me feel sad, it made me feel happy, you know. And that way then the person knows what they did and the result of it. And so that helps with effective communication as well. And number 5 is the consequences. Knowing what the consequences of a conflict, knowing what they are for you or what they are for the company, can also help. And it also helps you to plan, is this something that I want to fight, or is this something I want to float from, or is this something I want to flee from? And so knowing the consequences can help. And another thing that helps to preventing conflicts are emotions. So if I'm feeling sad today or angry today, this is maybe the day that I don't want to have to deal with a conflict. And I simply say to the person is, you know what, I really want to deal with this, but today's not the day for this. Can we do this tomorrow? And another thing is triggers, understanding what the triggers are for me. So triggers are usually things that have to do with another situation. So if I have to cancel a plan and somebody gets mad at me for doing that, that could be a trigger, is because it's bringing back negative past conflicts. And so I might know if I have to cancel a plan and the person gets upset, that I may have to go, okay, I need to remember here is not to escalate the situation, and that can help as well. Another thing that helps with preventing conflict is belief, hope, and visualization. So the power of belief. So a lot of times before I go to bed, I really try to picture my life how I want it to be. And I like to do this before bed, is because you're programming the subconscious mind at this point in time, and it can have a real powerful influence on your conscious mind throughout the day. And so I like to try to picture where I want my life to be, and not only picture it, as I like to feel it as if it's happening to me right now. And I end up going to bed with a really good mood, and I wake up feeling quite excited about the day. And this helps with conflicts, is because when we're picturing our where we want our life to go, or when we're picturing how we want our relationships to be with people, then we're bringing the positive into the world and into our futures. And so that's what I really find helpful. And so to end this talk, so basically conflicts can whether we see conflicts as a positive or a negative, can really influence how it affects our pain levels. And so if we're seeing it as something that's going to cause a stress or being really negative or bad, there's a possibility where it can increases our pain intensities. But when we see it as a learning opportunity, as something to grow, to bond, to practice effective communication skills, then conflict is seen as something as good in our lives, and it's more likely to decrease our pain levels and to have better control over our pain management. So lastly, I just wanted to leave you with some resources. So dealing with unresolved language, I believe that this presentation will be posted online, so you can click on the links. I also have them in my references, but there are some good websites here that will help you deal with unresolved anger that I found, and cognitive behavioral therapy. It will go a little bit in depth on about how to do these type of tools at home. Mindfulness therapy. So you can do a course. You can simply do it by Googling mindfulness training. There's lots of courses in Vancouver. It's an 8-week training course. I did it throughout the book. I would recommend buying the book and the Yellow Series CD tapes. It is still a tool that I use on a daily basis. And I encourage you to listen to Dr. Kelly's talk, is because it is one of the most inspirational talks and life-changing talks. And it's about how we look at stress and how changing our view of stress changes our body chemistry. And stress is can be a key component to conflict. And a lot of the talks you can relate to what we've been discussing here today. And lastly, I left you with the duty to accommodate rights. So by knowing your rights in the workforce, this can reduce a lot of conflicts. And so some questions you might want to ask yourselves. If not, I'll leave it up to the panel.
Wow, that's amazing, Kara. I have some questions here already for you. And for folks that I forgot to mention at the beginning, there's a little bar where you can type in questions, and there's also a chat bar where you can type in messages, and I've been watching both of those. So let me go to the question one here. I have a lovely message I want to pass on from Jerry. Or a statement. Anyway, he also says that you are both internally lovely and externally lovely. So there, pass that on.
Thank you.
Jerry. And he also asked a question. He says, I find that most interpersonal conflict has to do with a lack of communication. I also find that there is unwillingness on behalf of both parties to give their beliefs up. This cannot exist when one person is willing, to make the first move. Or this cannot exist when one person is willing to make the first move.
Yeah, it's really hard with dealing with conflicts, external conflicts between two people, when one person is stuck and the other person isn't. And however, I have found that you can still change and address these conflicts when one person is unwilling. And a lot of times psychologists are really good at helping individuals with it, but a lot of it has to do with deciding to float through it. And mindfulness training is really good to deal with that when you've come to an impasse and people aren't willing to agree to disagree.
All right. Are there any other questions? And while you're typing things in, I just want to let you know on September 22nd, Kara's going to do another webinar for us, and it will be on grief and loss. And I attended an earlier one that she did a few years ago, and it was amazingly helpful for me. So stay tuned for information going out about that in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully that you may want to join that one as well. We will also record it so you can watch it online, and this one has been recorded, so you can go back and review it at your leisure. Are there any other questions or comments that somebody wants to make? I'll check the chat box. Nope. I don't want to say there's no questions too soon because it always takes a sec to type something in. But at the moment, I see no further questions. And on that note, then I want to thank Kara so much for taking the time to present this wonderful information to us, and so helpful. And I made a few notes myself so I can tuck those away, so next time that I'm getting angry over something, I can think about why that is, and maybe do something different, and go from there. So thank you again, Kara, for sharing such amazingly helpful information, and we look forward to the next webinar as well.
Well, thank you for listening, and I think we're all doing a really good job. It's hard, so.
You know, it is hard, and when I go to my groups, I often remind people that they're amazingly enduring and resilient and strong to be able to get up every morning and do the best they can every day. So don't forget that, and don't forget to give yourself a little pat on the back for just getting from morning to night. Yes. And I see no more questions, so at this point I'm going to end our webinar, and again it will be up on our website, which is pipain.com, and it will be added to the 80 some other recorded presentations, webinars, and really useful information that we've been collecting since we became an organization. So thank you all for attending. It was wonderful to have over 30 people with us today, and we'll see you hopefully in September. Enjoy your day.
Bye-bye.